4 trillion. And so, just in the case of Thailand, I would start buying, PTT and Banbu because this will be the areas where most of the money infrastructure will be. And the second largest will be in the road construction. And surprisingly, the other infrastructures are quite small. And the third largest will be in the IT, in the communications. So, of the $8 trillion US dollars infrastructure development in Asia next 10 years, energy will be first, followed by road construction, followed by IT communications. So Japan is targeting, these markets. And they have also reorganized, I think, the marketing arms, of Japan. Now the government is joined together with the private sector, PPP, and the government and the private sectors will go out together to get the contracts. For example, I think about a month ago, the Minister Meti went to Vietnam to personally try to push Japan's nuclear industry, with Vietnam. And I think the government together, I think with Japanese private sector, have identified about 9 infrastructure projects in Southeast Asia, in our region, that they want to go after. But it is very interesting, of the 9 infrastructure projects that Japan is going after in Southeast Asia, there is none in Thailand. And about 5 projects in Indonesia, followed by about 2 or 3 in Vietnam and in Malaysia. And I brought this, I think, when our Thai trade representative, Dr. Vajra, went to Japan, I think a month ago. I brought this fact to the attention of Dr. Vajra, and I said, Thailand is not in the radar screen, of the Japanese private sector, in spite of the fact that if you look at the present economic relationship with Japan with Asia, last year, the profit remittances from Japanese companies in Thailand, sent back to Japan is 330 billion yen. It's the second largest profit remittances by Japanese companies sent back to Japan, second only to Japanese companies in China. So, just think that if Thailand, which has maybe only 5% of China's population, is the second largest sources of profit revenues of Japanese companies, why are we not now in Japan's radar? I think so. I arranged for our Thai trade representative to talk directly to the Nikkei, which is like the Wall Street Journal of Japan, and point out the fact that in the next 3 years, the Thai government will be investing approximately 4.3 trillion yen, or over 1.1 million baht to renew and renovate our infrastructure in road and rail construction, in utilities, in water system management, in IT. So we need to get this information out, because I think most of the Japanese press was so, the opinions about that were so colored by our domestic problems earlier this year. They don't see that in spite of some domestic problems in Thailand earlier this year, Thai economy is booming. And we point out the fact that this year in Asia, according, I think, to several projections, the Thai economy will grow, the third fastest growing economy in Asia. The first will be Singapore, and then China, and then Thailand, growing about 7.5%. So this is the fact that I think we are trying to get out to the Japanese private sector, that in terms of profit remittances, we are the second largest economic part of Japan in Asia, second only to China. At present, on the radar of the Japanese private sector and the government is Vietnam and Indonesia. And we point out the fact that if you just look at the profit remittances last year, the profit remittances from the companies, from Indonesia to Japan is only 1/4 of the profit remittances from Thailand. And if you look at the profit remittances from Vietnam to Japan, it's only 1/20 of the profit remittance from Thailand. And when you look at the terms of revenue stream, about $330 billion, 130 billion yen in profit remittances last year, plus about $10 billion dollars surplus that Japan had with Thailand last year. The stream of revenue from Thailand to Japan is over $1 trillion yen last year. So we are actually the biggest economic partner of Japan in Southeast Asia and in Asia. So this is the fact that we must remind the Japanese private sector and Japanese government, and we are reminded. And so I think the next is that we also discussed, our Thai trade representative also discussed with the then Minister of National Strategy of Japan, Mr. Arai, that given the degree of economic interdependence between Japan and Thailand, and the trend of increasing industrial integration, especially in the automobile sector and also in the electronic sector, maybe it's time for the economic planners of our two countries to sit together and coordinate our economic development plans. So I think that will be the next step in our cooperation and interaction, with Japan. So then let me summarize that. I think maybe these some facts. I think for the Thai entrepreneurs here. If you look from the Japanese perspective, after the global recession, during the past 2 years, the traditional market, US and EU, will diminish. I say they will contribute. The percentage of their contribution towards GDP will be reduced from 60% to 40%. And in reverse, the emerging economies will be coming to replace the traditional markets. So in the future, I think we should also take a hard look about how we are going to diversify our export strategy and our investment strategy into the emerging economies, especially the Asian emerging economies. And so I think this is, lesson that we can profit, from Japan's analysis. And also, we should also take a look, like Japan did, asking ourselves, in which areas are we good at? In which areas are we strong? Japan has already come to the conclusion that given Japan's advanced technology in mass production, in the new environmental technology, the energy efficiency industry, Japan can sell these infrastructure systems to the emerging countries and the Asian emerging countries. We also have to ask ourselves, what do we have to sell to these markets? And last maybe is that I think Dr. Sonkis mentioned we need again to have to emphasize the good points about economy. For example, in Japan, we have, after the protest has subsided, the whole Thai economic team in the embassy will request for meeting with the Thai-Japan economic gathering. And we had maybe a 3-hour session with the gathering, giving them statistics about the Thai economy to show that the protest has not gravely or adversely affected the Thai economy, and that there are still great opportunities for economic cooperation between our two countries. So I think this is for the economic part. But let me add just a few minutes if our two eminent participants could bear with me, because Dr. Sonkik also touched on the geopolitical landscape. Because when we look at the future, we have to be mindful that although the economic statistics point to Asia rising, we have to ask ourselves whether it is rising peacefully. Dr. Sonkik mentioned or has described the traditional diplomatic strategy of China, that they will try to work towards creating a peaceful environment which will be conducive to China's economic development. And the tone of China, I think, when it was growing, as Dr. Sonkik used the word, he used the word translated is humble. But the new tone of China is different, as people see. And what we see now in the present confrontation between Japan and China. And what should give us concern is whether this new tone is just a reaction to the domestic pressure. For example, at present in China, there are approximately 30 million Chinese bloggers who are the biggest opinion makers, in China. And most of them are very nationalistic, very patriotic. And during the present confrontation between Japan and China, these bloggers are very vociferous, urging the Chinese government to take a very aggressive and confrontation attitude. So whether the present Chinese stance reflects this domestic pressure, or whether this is finally China thinking that it has come of age to take the velvet glove and shows its iron fist. And if that is the case, we, I think, in the governments and maybe also the private sectors, have to start thinking whether what we are studying together now, for example, the FTA for the ASEAN Plus 3, the EFTA, East Asia Free Trade Area, or the FTA envisaged for the ASEAN Plus 6, the CPF, will materialize soon or not, given the growing tension and confrontation, and given the growing assertiveness of China in underscoring its historical claims in the South China Sea, in the East Asia Sea, in the Yellow Sea. And this area comprised really the heart of our East Asia economic community. So I think we have to take this into consideration, and maybe to work together, I think, to facilitate maybe a meeting of minds between the relevant stakeholders, Japan, South Korea, China, and our fellow ASEAN countries who are stakeholders in the South China Sea, to see whether they can sit down together and again to borrow, from, I think, the words of the late President Kennedy, not to negotiate out of fear, and not to fear to negotiate, and also to use the existing rules, international rules and norms under the law of the sea, and also the ASEAN Code of Conduct as a basis to settle these disputed claims. Because if these disputed claims, are not taken care of, the tension will always be there. If the tension is always be there, the political trust, which should be the political foundation for any economic cooperation, will not be there. So I think, the new Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan said, I think recently, that for economic cooperation, to progress in Asia, there should be a stable political and security environment. And I think we should all work, to bring about such a stable political and security environment, which will be conducive to further economic cooperation in creating a peaceful East Asian community. Thank you very much.
I think he gave us a lot of thoughts on why we are not on the radar screen of Japan. That is really interesting, considering our close relationship. But what has triggered that move?